Okay, hello guys. Today our topic is about perpendicular bisectors, okay? So let's move into the first part of it. Okay, so what is a perpendicular bisector? Okay, so first, perpendicular means the two lines are perpendicular and their intercept angle equals to 90 degrees, right? And bisector means I just divided you and make you into two parts. And which the two parts which are the same length and same distance, right? Okay, so you can find here, perpendicular means the two lines have a line like intercept angle exactly equals to 90 degrees, right? And bisector means I just cut you in half, right? So you can find here, I'll give you example like the blue lines right here, just cut up the line AB into two parts, okay? So we can call the blue line is a perpendicular bisector of line AB, okay? So there are four steps to master the method. Okay. So if you want to find how to calculate the perpendicular lines, okay. So first you can find the midpoint of the line segment. Okay. Like here, maybe we have the AB right here. Please find the midpoint M at the very first beginning. Okay. And then you can find the gradient M1 for original segment. Like here, gradient MAB, you know that. The third step is to find the gradient M maybe perpendicular and bisector line, okay? And then because we knew the midpoint, we knew the gradient, we can calculate the equations form of the line, right? Okay? That is for the four steps to master the method, okay? So here are our working example for you, okay? Like here is a maybe here we have a line, it has A 4 and B A -8 on it, right? And we can just find the midpoint of M right here. M equals to 2 plus 8 over 2 and 4 plus -8 over 2, okay? And then you can find the value is 10 over 2 and -4 over 2. So midpoint here is 5, -2. And if you want to find the perpendicular line, the step two is to find the original gradient, right? Okay. So here the gradient we knew that m equals to the changing y over changing x, right? So here changing y means the -8 minus 4, right? And changing x means 8 minus 2, right? So the value here equals to -12 over 6 equals to -2. That is the gradient right here, okay? So we have the gradient, we have the point, we can find the perpendicular bisector's gradient, right? So here we can set -2 times m equals to -1. So here gradient equals to a half, okay? Then you can put the midpoint m, 5, -2 into the lines. So here we can read that as -2 equals to a half times 5 plus c. So finally the value c equals to -4.5. So then you can put a half and -4.5 into the lines. That can become y equals to a half x minus 4.5. So the value you can also write it down as 2y equals to x minus 9. Okay, that's the equation right here. And for the geometric properties of the bisectors, here are two. Okay, first is equidistance. That means we have a line and then we have a perpendicular bisector, and you can find AB have the same distance to any of the points on the line or on the perpendicular line, okay? That's a equidistance. And also we can say that circles, okay? Because circles, we can say we have a central and every line passing through the central must be diameter, okay? So you can say, or maybe here we can draw a circle and the circles maybe we can say this is the diameter of the circle, right? Okay, passing through the midpoint, and also it becomes the diameter, okay? So here's some deliberate practice for you, okay? So if you want to do yourself, you can just pause the video and try it on, okay? And if you want to follow with me, you can just keep on going, okay? So maybe for fourth point, is a segment join 0, 4 and 6, 10, right? And we want to find the perpendicular bisectors, right? So first we can find, step one is to find the midpoint, right? So that is 0 plus 6 over 2 and 4 plus 10 over 2, right? That's a point, coordinate is 3, maybe here is 7, right? 3, 7. And we can then calculate the gradient across the 2 point, right? That is 10 minus 4, 6 minus 0, that is 1, right? So we have the lines. The gradient is y equals to mx plus c, and we knew that because AB is perpendicular to the bisector, right? So bisector has a new gradient, perpendicular bisector, and then we can times the original gradient is 1, right? Equals to -1, okay? So here it equals to y equals to -x plus c, right? Okay? And we can just put the coordinate 3, 7 into the lines, right? So that we can written that as 7 equals to -3 plus c, okay? So we can set maybe c here equals to 10, okay? So we can set that the line here maybe here equals to y equals to maybe for x minus 10, okay? That is a first problem, okay? And for second problem is that find the perpendicular bisector for -4, -2, and for -6, right? And first we can find the midpoint, right? Midpoint here equals to -4 plus 4 over 2, right? That is a mean value for the two values, right? And then it's -2 minus 6 over 2, right? Okay? And then you can set the midpoint value here. It can be written down as m, here is 0, and here is for -2 minus 6 is -8, -8 over 2 is -4, right? That is a gradient, or that is a midpoint of the, okay? And then you can set maybe the gradient here equals to changing y over changing x, right? So changing y here is -6 minus -2 and 4 minus -4, right? So the value here we can write down as -1/2. So the gradient for the perpendicular bisector is m times -1 over 2 equals to -1. So perpendicular bisector's gradient equals to 2. So we can say the equation must be y equals to 2x plus c, right? And here we also passing through the midpoint 0, -4, right? So we can write that as -4 equals to 2 times 0 plus c, okay? So c equals to -4. So finally, the line can be written down as 2x minus 4, right? Y equals to 2x minus 4. So you can just let this value to become on the left. That is y minus 2x plus 4 equals to 0, okay? That is the second problem. And for the third problem is that maybe here we have P and Q is on the circumference of the circle, right? And we have to find the perpendicular bisector PQ and intersect the x-axis at the center of the circle, right? Okay, so we can set maybe here the bisector intersects at the center of the circle. This point must be the midpoint, right? So we can say midpoint is a midpoint of P and Q, right? So that is -1 plus 5 over 2 and 5 plus 7 over 2, right? That the value is maybe here is for 4 over 2 is 2, and this value is for 5 plus 7 over 2 equals 6, okay? And also, this point is also on the bisector, right? You can also calculate the gradient for bisector and to find the final value for the bisector, okay? So I think today's lesson sometimes a little bit difficult, but if you're very familiar with how to find the midpoint, how to find the gradient of line, how to find the perpendicular lines, and then you can solve the final answer, okay? So I hope you can do more exercise after this class and trying to become familiar with it, okay? So that's all for today's lesson. See you next day. Bye.